명수가 아니라 어떠한 배역을 받아도 다 넣어서 소화해낼 수 있는 그런 스펙트럼이 넓은 명수가 되고 싶습니다.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, December 2nd, here in South Korea, the National Assembly convenes a plenary session this afternoon to vote on the budget bill for next year at the government-proposed total of 728 trillion won. And President Lee Jae-myung reaffirms his resolve to bring to justice all those behind South Korea's short-lived martial law declaration on December 3rd last year by the former administration. Meanwhile, shares of South Korea's largest online retailer Coupang lose substantial ground on Wall Street, following the company's acknowledgement of a major data leak that began in June and was detected in November. We start today at the National Assembly, where lawmakers across the aisle are gathering for a plenary session later this evening to pass next year's budget bill, as the Parliament counts down just hours to its midnight deadline for that bill. We connect now to our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun for details. Hae-ryun, welcome. So what's the latest at the Parliament?
Good afternoon, Sunny. The plenary session is due to begin in just under 3 hours from now at 8 p.m, and it's widely expected that the budget bill will pass. The ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party have been at odds over various aspects of the bill, but following a series of meetings between the floor leaders, they managed to reach an agreement earlier today on Tuesday to process the bill at the session. Although the legal deadline for South Korea's budget bill to be processed at the National Assembly always falls on December 2nd, this is the first time in 5 years that lawmakers will actually manage to do so, as the budget bill has always been been a contentious piece of legislation. It was reported that the two rival parties agreed to cut roughly 4.3 trillion Korean won, or around $2.9 billion from various sections within the government's original proposal, and to increase funding only within the scope of that cut, meaning that the overall scale of the budget bill will stay at a record 728 trillion won. They agreed not to reduce budget allocations for key national agenda items of the Lee Jae-myung administration, such as support for issuing local gift certificates and the National Growth Fund, while cutting some funding from AI-related support programs, policy funds, and reserve budget items. Here's what the floor leaders of each party had to say.
What matters now is execution. This budget must improve people's daily lives, and the Democratic Party will take full responsibility. We'll do our best to make today's budget the starting point for tomorrow's change.
Given the importance of livelihood-related budgets, we ask for your understanding that we agree broadly to pass the budget by the deadline.
And that's all I have for now, but I'll be back in a later newscast with more detailed information. So back to you, Sunny.
All right, Arirang, thank you for now. And yes, do keep us posted. Meanwhile, speaking on the eve of the first anniversary of South Korea's brief martial law under the former administration, President Lee Jae-myung reaffirmed his resolve to bring to justice all those involved. Our Yoon Min reports.
Rooting out the remnants of last year's military rule was among the key topics at Tuesday's cabinet meeting, ahead of the first anniversary of the December 3rd martial law declaration by former President Yoon Suk-yeol.
여기서 멈추지 말아야겠습니다. 곳곳에 숨겨진 내란의 어둠을 온전히 밝혀내서 진정으로 정의로운 국민 통합의 문을 활짝 열어야 합니다.
He sent a similar message the previous day, revisiting his will to make sure any remnants related to the short-lived military rule would not go unpunished. As the president reiterated a no-tolerance principle when it comes to investigating the incident, he instructed his justice minister to speed up reintroducing a bill aimed at eliminating the statute of limitations for state violence, which was vetoed by the previous administration. At the same time, he called for leniency for those who turned themselves in or who were forced into it.
이게 적당히 덮어놓는 게 통합은 아니라고 생각이 돼요. 대신에 그렇다고 해서 그걸 극렬하게 과혹하게 하자는 건 또 아니잖아요. 자발적으로 신고하는 경우는 책임을 감면하는 거를 방침을 좀 정하십시오.
President Lee Jae-myung once again noted South Korea's democratic resilience, stressing efforts by the people who stood up against the martial law on the night it was declared.
비상계엄 저지와 헌정질서 수호에 함께한 국민들에게 표창 등 의미 있는 증서를 수여하고 그날의 국민적 노고와 국민주권 정신을 대대로 기억하기 위한 방안을 마련해 나갈 생각입니다.
On December 3rd, Lee will deliver a special statement and hold a press conference with foreign media outlets. Later in the evening, he will join a march with the people, calling for an end to insurrection. Both liberals and conservatives plan to organize separate rallies on Wednesday. Yoon Min, Arirang News.
Up next, we take a look at the impact of the short-lived martial law declaration on the South Korean economy, starting with the initial shock to its eventual recovery. Our correspondent Park Chun-han walks us through these developments, that is, and the tasks ahead.
South Korea is again starting to see signs of an economic recovery after a series of events behind major uncertainties, such as the shift of power due to the failed martial law declaration and the finalization of tariff negotiations. The Bank of Korea has since projected South Korea's growth rate to be 1% this year and 1.8% in 2026. Next year's projected growth rate is higher due to a recovery in domestic demand and resilient exports, particularly semiconductors. The International Monetary Fund has also raised its next year's growth projection for South Korea to 1.8%, following this year's forecast of a 0.9% increase. South Korea's quarter-on-quarter GDP saw a contraction in the first quarter of 2025, but has since started to rebound. Also, over the past year, South Korea's consumer sentiment has kept growing since hitting 88.2 points last December due to Yoon's brief imposition of martial law. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, which is considered optimistic when above 100, surpassed the threshold in May and has continued to climb. In November, it reached 112.4, marking the highest level in 8 years.
As uncertainties eased after the end of martial law and expectations of economic recovery began to form, consumer sentiment appears to be rising as well.
South Korea's benchmark Kospi has also seen a sharp rise of over 66% in 2025, especially after the new government took office in June. The index increase reflects the government's strong policy to shift money flows from being heavily focused on the real estate market to the stock market. Along with the finalized tariff negotiations with the U.S. and the strong performance of AI-related and export-focused stocks, the Kospi has recorded the highest increase among major global indices. However, despite the improvements in economic conditions over the past year, there are still some concerns that South Korea needs to address to move forward. Data from the Bank of Korea and the Bank for International Settlements shows that the Korean won, compared to major trading partner currencies, fell to its weakest level in 16 years and 2 months as of late October. Also, the $1 exchange rate is now trading in the level of 1,471 per US dollar, which saw an increase of 6.2% in 6 months and a 32.7% increase over 5 years.
It's been quite some time since U.S. interest rates surpassed those of Korea. And because many Korean companies now have more reasons to invest in the U.S., the profits they earn from exports are not being remitted back home. Along with Korean investors increasing their investments in overseas stocks, these factors have reduced the supply of dollars while increasing demand.
The Lee Jae-myung administration's expansionary fiscal policy has helped boost the country's economy, but at the same time, it has put pressure on the accelerating national debt. For example, the budget for next year, set at 728 trillion won, is 8.1% higher than last year's budget. Also, it is widely expected that the country will see an even higher annual national debt with the issuance of at least 100 trillion won worth of bonds. But experts here say where and how to allocate money is more important than the absolute amount of the budget.
In the end, it all comes down to where the money is spent and how effectively it's used to serve as the catalyst we want. Fiscal policy requires very specific, targeted spending. So if those measures work well, it can be very positive. But if not, concerns over the country's growing debt will only deepen.
In 2025, South Korea navigated domestic and international uncertainties while establishing and implementing a new national agenda. As 2026 approaches, eyes are on whether the Lee administration's fiscal push will deliver sustained growth and bring stability to the volatile foreign exchange market. 박준환, Arirang News.
The fallout of Coupang's extensive data leak is being witnessed on Wall Street as well, with the online retailer's shares tumbling as investors respond to the company's failure to protect the personal information of over 33 million customers. Our Cha Yoon-kyung has the latest.
South Korean retail giant Coupang stock price plunged more than 5% on the New York Stock Exchange on Monday local time, following a massive personal information breach. Coupang closed at $26.65 per share on the day, down 5.36% from the previous day's trading. The aftermath of the incident negatively affected investor sentiment on the U.S. stock market, further fueling a sharp decline in share prices. Bloomberg News pointed out that the incident clearly exposes the vulnerabilities of South Korea's cybersecurity, leading to Coupang's inadequate personal information protection system coming under heavy criticism. The incident has reignited debate over Coupang's incorporation's founder and board chairman Kim Bum-seok. Kim holds over 70% of the company's voting rights, yet he has repeatedly avoided attending National Assembly hearings, citing reasons such as being abroad. In November last year, he cashed out a staggering 484.6 billion won after converting his shares and selling them. Despite generating most of its revenue in Korea through a growing base of Korean consumers, Coupang has been criticized for shirking its social responsibilities by citing its status as a U.S. corporation listed on the U.S. stock market. Police in Seoul are stepping up their investigation into the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang, saying they have now secured the internet protocol address used by the suspect and are tracing their movements. Authorities say the breach began in June and ultimately exposed the personal information of nearly 34 million customers. Coupang revealed the scale of the breach on Saturday, identifying a former employee, a Chinese national who has already left South Korea, as a person responsible. An official with the Seoul Metropolitan Police told reporters on Monday that investigators are analyzing server logs submitted by Coupang. They confirmed that the IP address used in the intrusion has been secured and that officers are now working to locate the suspect. Authorities are coordinating with related ministries to prepare for possible follow-up crimes, given the scale of the leaked information. Meanwhile, public frustration is turning into legal action. Some users have already filed suits through local law firms, setting the stage for what could become a prolonged legal and regulatory battle for the e-commerce giant. 차윤경, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, consumer prices here held steady for the third month in a row in November, gaining 2.4% on year, remaining unchanged from October and hovering above the central bank's 2% target. Our Yoon covers the latest reading.
Exceeding the Bank of Korea's 2% target, South Korea's consumer prices grew 2.4% on year in November. This is according to data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Tuesday, which shows that consumer prices, a key gauge of inflation, have maintained the same pace of increase as the previous month. Looking at the year 2025, inflation remained above 2% from January through April, before slowing to 1.9% in May, but rose back above 2% in both June and July. The rate dropped to 1.7% in August, but rose to over 2% again in September and October. The government says last month's increase was largely due to a sharp rise in prices of agriculture, livestock, and fishery products, which jumped 5.6% on year. Petroleum prices jumped 5.9%, marking the highest rate of increase since February. A ministry official noted that these are goods most sensitive to foreign currency changes. The high exchange rate has visibly driven up costs for imported essentials, such as petroleum products, food, and raw materials. The Korean won has been among the world's weakest performing currencies over the past year. The Lifestyle Price Index, which tracks frequently purchased goods and services, climbed 2.9%. This marks the steepest increase in 1 year and 4 months, specifically since July of last year. Prices of industrial goods increased 2.3%, while electricity, gas, and water rates rose 0.4%. Impact factors include a strong U.S. dollar and currency volatility, but also unfavorable weather conditions, of which the government says it will remain vigilant and will respond swiftly to manage stable prices. Yoon, Arirang News.
And in Washington, D.C., a South Korean delegation and its U.S. counterparts sat down for talks this past Monday aimed at putting into action the agreements detailed in their joint fact sheet, including lower auto tariffs and nuclear-powered submarines. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korean automobiles exported to the United States will now be subject to a 15% tariff, down from the 25% tariff implemented in April. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced through social media on Monday that import duties have been reduced to 15% retroactively to November 1st. Lutnick stated the move matches reciprocal tariffs imposed on Japan and the European Union and follows Seoul's recent legislative steps to fulfill investment pledges made to the U.S. A bill for special investment in the U.S. has been proposed at the National Assembly to carry out the $350 billion worth of investment by South Korea agreed during recent trade negotiations. This economic development comes as diplomats from both sides met in Washington to accelerate the implementation of a joint fact sheet that lays out a broad package of trade, investment, and security agreements reached between President Lee Jae-myung and President Donald Trump last month. First Vice Foreign Minister Park Yoon-ju met with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau on Monday to work on carrying out those agreements.
We confirmed a shared consensus with the U.S. side to implement the joint fact sheet swiftly and actively.
To achieve this, both sides agreed to establish task forces to drive simultaneous progress across key industries.
We agreed to match specific agencies for each issue to ensure the right counterparts are communicating effectively to move things forward.
A key agenda item was the production of nuclear-powered submarines, which the U.S. gave the green light to following the Trump summit in Gyeongju. During the meeting, Vice Minister Park urged his U.S. counterpart to swiftly begin discussions on civil uranium enrichment and spent nuclear fuel reprocessing by South Korea. Deputy Secretary Landau welcomed South Korea's unprecedented investment commitments. Addressing the recent detention of Korean workers in Georgia, officials noted substantive progress in preventing a recurrence, including the opening of a dedicated visa consultation desk for Korean enterprises. Vice Minister Park is scheduled to meet with White House NSC officials later this week to further discuss the implementation of these measures. 김도현, Arirang News.
And in other news, South Korea's new multi-purpose satellite Arirang 7 has made contact with a ground station after its launch from South America. The Korea Aerospace Administration says the satellite separated from the Vega C rocket, which lifted off at 2:21 a.m. Korea Standard Time from the Guyana Space Center in Kourou. It established first communication after an hour following liftoff with the Troll base station in Antarctica. Officials add that Arirang 7's solar panels were deployed properly and that all systems appear stable. However, 4 additional communications reportedly need to be made before the mission can be declared a success.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Europe, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy has made it clear that territory is the biggest obstacle to any peace deal with Russia. He said Ukraine will not surrender land in Donbas, even as Russia keeps demanding it. His comments came in Paris on Monday after talks on ending the war with France's President Emmanuel Macron and leaders from the UK, Germany, Poland, and Italy. At the same time in Florida, Ukrainian and U.S. officials completed 2 days of negotiations to rewrite an early peace plan that Kyiv believed was tilted towards Moscow. The White House said it is very optimistic that progress can be made. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet President Vladimir Putin in Russia on Tuesday alongside Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner to deliver the results of the Florida talks. Zelenskyy said the discussions were constructive, but warned that territory remains the toughest issue to resolve. In Ukraine, a Russian missile strike on the city of Dnipro killed 4 people and wounded 40, according to Ukrainian officials on Monday. The acting regional governor said 11 of the injured are in serious condition and that search and rescue operations have been completed. Emergency services reported damage to office buildings, businesses, and 49 cars. Images posted online showed firefighters and crews evacuating people on stretchers. Dnipro and its surrounding region has faced frequent Russian missile and drone attacks since 2022. Russia has not commented on the strike. In the United States, the White House released a memo on Monday confirming that President Donald Trump underwent MRI scans of his heart and abdomen in October as part of what his doctor called a preventive executive-level physical. Trump's physician Sean Barbabella said the cardiovascular and abdominal imaging was perfectly normal, adding that the scans are meant for men in Trump's age group to detect issues early. The memo was released after Trump told reporters on Sunday that the MRI results were, quote, perfect. The White House said the scans were part of his routine physical at Walter Reed, though doctors note these types of MRIs are not standard in typical medical screenings. Oxford University Press named rage bait as its word of the year on Monday after the term's usage shot up threefold in the last 12 months. It's defined as content engineered to make you angry just long enough to boost clicks. A sign, Oxford says, that people now recognize how easily online emotions get steered. The phrase first appeared in 2002 before evolving into today's go-to label for outrage-driven posts. 주지현, Arirang News.
It's just a couple of days into December and a cold wave advisory has already been issued in Seoul. In addition, a cold wave advisory is in place in the central regions and the northern parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. The temperature difference from the morning was not so great, with the daytime temperature staying at only 2 degrees in Seoul. As a strong cold spell gradually descends, the minimum temperature in Seoul will drop up to -8 degrees Celsius tomorrow morning. With freezing winds, the feels-like temperature will drop even further to -12 degrees Celsius. You should pay special attention to keeping yourself warm. Most areas will start off at below 0 degrees, with Chuncheon at -11 degrees, Daegu and Gyeongju at -4 degrees. Daily highs will rise to 3 degrees in Gwangju and Daegu, 9 degrees in Jeju. There's a possibility of the first snow of the season in Seoul on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.
To set the facts straight. Get Korea right.
안녕하세요. 방크에서 활동하는 박지은 연구원입니다. 한글은 600년의 역사를 가진 우리나라 고유의 문자인데요. 한글에 대해 잘 모르는 분도 많고 또 잘못된 정보를 접한 분도 꽤 있더라고요. 사이버 외교사절 딴 방크의 일원으로서 제가 한글에 대한 올바른 정보를 전달해 드릴게요. 한글은 조선 4대 왕인 세종대왕이 1443년에 창제한 글자예요. 한글은 자음과 모음으로 구성되어 있는데요. 자음은 입술, 이, 목구멍과 같이 발음기관의 모양이나 그 움직임을 본떠 만들었고요. 모음은 하늘, 땅, 사람을 본떠 한글의 창제 원리와 사용법을 써놓은 훈민정음 해례본은 1962년 대한민국 국보로 지정되었고 1997년 유네스코 세계기록유산으로 등재되었습니다. 창적이고 과학적이며 아름다운 문자인 한글, 한국인의 위대한 문화유산입니다. 한국 바로 알리기. 여러분도 함께 해주세요.
Sovereign AI. Now this is the buzzword and it's gaining much traction as countries including South Korea seek to secure a substantial degree of autonomy in artificial intelligence to ensure their economic stability and national security. We have details coming up next. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective for December 2nd here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Artificial intelligence has been taking center stage at multilateral meetings within the diplomatic arena in recent times amid the race, of course, to harness technology for national development and defense. For more on this, I have Thomas Moresco with the American news agency United Press International here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I also have Chloe Bogno with French broadcaster France 24 here in the studio as well. Chloe, it's lovely to have you here.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thomas, we shall start with you. Artificial intelligence was on the agenda at the most recent multilateral meetings here in South Korea. I'm talking about the APEC, of course, and the G20 over in South Africa. Perhaps we could start by revisiting the discussions related to AI at these multilateral gatherings.
Sure. Yeah, as you said, AI was kind of took center stage at both of these in a way that, maybe it had been more of like a technical sidebar in the past, but now it really seemed to be center stage, especially I think in APEC, which was kind of driven by South Korea hosting APEC, and this has just been obviously a key element of certainly the Lee Jae-myung administration's policy, but even prior to that, I think South Korea has really been trying to position itself as a kind of a leader in AI and in the kind of the multilateral sense of figuring out all of these, various, not just the tech stuff, but the governance and the, impact on economy and security. So well into the lead up of APEC, South Korea was kind of hosting different, AI agenda items. And so at APEC, it became kind of a, one of the central discussion points, and was just ended up being at the kind of right at the top of the Gyeongju Declaration, sort of by all the APEC leaders, and right at the very top saying AI, calls for strengthened cooperation and concrete actions to enable economic growth that benefits all. And so that was kind of the idea behind it. And then there was, for the first time, there was a separate initiative called the APEC AI Initiative, which was adopted here. And that was just also basically, to recognize the great potential that AI has for all of these economies, and the fact that most of these APEC countries are sort of well positioned to be at the forefront of that, but also so unlocking the sort of innovation and productivity, but maintaining this sense of fair access, and not letting it grow too far, the benefits only be, to a few players, sort of thing. So, there was a whole APEC initiative released, and, basically ministers emphasizing that, AI must be promoted alongside structural reforms, digital infrastructure, talent development, fair access. We talked about some coordinated approaches within and across member economies, voluntary review, stakeholder collaboration, policy exchange, sort of on those levels. So, it became something where it's not just about the tech, but, just the central component in trade, investment, competitiveness, and, inclusive economic development. And that also carried over into G20. I mean, Lee Jae-myung was there and also, talked it up, and he spoke at a session that was dedicated to AI called, was it called A Fair Future for All, and just also emphasized that, and sort of, adding this governance dimension to the G20 countries. And, that was also in their kind of final statement, reaffirming, human-centric rights, respecting transparency, innovation-friendly regulation for AI. There was a special AI for Africa component as well, so kind of spreading the idea of, managing it responsibly and, equitably, and including others. So, I think just maybe the summary is that it's really very much this year became a centerpiece around which a lot of the other issues of economy and governance were discussed. Right. And Korea kind of leading that push, I think, in both cases.
Right, indeed. And against the backdrop of this emphasis on artificial intelligence, Chloe, quite a number of countries are reportedly seeking to reduce reliance on superpowers like the US and China. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular reality and the reasons behind it?
Yeah, so there's kind of a shift in the way that countries are currently building their national securities. So in a lot of countries, at least, for example, Middle East or Europe as well, the idea is to not only rely on traditional weaponry or nuclear arsenal, but also to treat AI infrastructure as part of a strategic national asset. So the idea is that they need sovereignty, as we were saying, AI sovereignty, but that means going through technological sovereignty. So that would mean mostly being able to get infrastructure to develop also AI solutions nationally. So that will also be meaning getting the positions from the supply chains to being able to build your own chips in your country, to being able to get big players that are national, like NVIDIA in the US, or other players that are big component for building AI ecosystems inside each countries. Why is AI so important that it's being compared to weaponry now? It's because for most of us, when we're speaking about AI, we will only be thinking about some language-based solution. So, when you're asking your phone, can you tell me this or that? This is only a very small part of AI, that's language-based generated content. But the truth is, AI has been used also for, it's actually machine learning system. So you'll give them a lot of data, and the AI system are able to give you solution and to learn themselves from there. So what's interesting in AI for most of the countries is it can be used in the medical field, in military, in big data. It can even be developed into forecasting weathers or natural disasters or stuff like that. So there's a very big impact on every national economies, and I think the countries have been quite recently seeing how important it is to be getting away from the big players that are the United States and China. And we've seen it, for example, with South Korea, but a lot of others are doing the same now.
Right, and thus the search for sovereign AI then. Thomas, South Korea, it's considered as one of the few countries that will be able to achieve sovereign AI by quite a number of pundits. That being said, what has been said about South Korea's current standing in the race, in the AI race, of course, and its potential capacity going forward?
Yeah, I think South Korea is kind of emerging as a test case in a way for sovereign AI. If it is possible to kind of have this sovereign AI infrastructure, the models, the data, the governance under national control, and it's definitely a big emphasis by the current administration. I think yes, that there is a sense that of countries trying to do it, South Korea may be one of the best positioned to be able to pull it off, because South Korea already has so many of the components of the, sort of the full stack AI necessary. There's, world-leading semiconductor industry. There's kind of a burgeoning AI chip development side. There's cloud infrastructure. You need data sets for AI, and South Korea is such a hyper-digitalized society. There's a lot of that, and there's just a pool of talent here. And then you just have a big sort of push and investment and emphasis by the government, the Lee Jae-myung administration. I think to sort of follow what Chloe was saying, one of the biggest advocates for sovereign AI has been Ha Jung-woo, who's now sort of the AI czar of the government, and he was a Naver sort of AI guy, and he was one of the big. He's been pushing this concept for quite a while, and in addition to the sort of economic and other benefits, he did sort of frame it sometimes in this geopolitical context as a kind of a neo-imperialism factor in the 21st century, and sort of big powers will be able to use AI to kind of dominate the digital territories of other countries. So, he's saying that this is kind of a shield, is necessary in a way to be a shield to these, larger powers. And I think it's also this idea that South Korea could emerge as a kind of a third way or middle power for other countries to partner with that don't only want to be, beholden to the US or China. And, you can see South Korea trying to find that space in other areas and globally as well. So it kind of fits into that. And I think, generally, South Korea is seen as probably having a plausible shot because of the know-how and the tech firms here and the investment and the political willpower to do it. And there's also the idea that maybe there's not just going to be one AI champion. There are these major powers like the Samsungs and the SK Hynix and Naver, but there's there are some smaller startups that are getting involved in some of those areas. So those are possible, positive signs, but there's also just a lot that I think remains to be seen. It's requiring deep. So much can change so quickly in AI. It's even, are you focusing on the right side of it? Is it just large language models or other? Should you be focusing more on other areas? And I can talk a bit more about that after. But there's certainly many challenges ahead in the government and regulatory frameworks and, collaboration and things. But I think, for now, it's seen as if a country is going to be able to pull off such a thing, South Korea is probably, well positioned to do it. And, the question may end up being, is it worth trying to do that? But yeah, that's
right,
where it is.
Right. And speak about other countries, Chloe, for the sake of comparison, what can you tell us about the efforts of South Korea's partners in the race for sovereign AI?
Yeah, so we can take a few examples. So first of all, if we speak about, for example, Middle East, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, they're coming in strong. They've started a bit later than other players, but what they're doing is, it's important for them actually to do that, is to reposition themselves from the oil market, where they are the leaders, to being able to be a big part, maybe foundation of the global AI system later on, because everyone knows that for now, oil is the main way of living. We need oil, we need petroleum, we need all the derivative from it. But everyone knows that the stocks are not unlimited, and that one day or another, those countries will need to be able to get their money from somewhere else. And they've understood that quite well, let's say. If we take the example of Saudi Arabia, so they are using the low-cost energy because as a producer of crude oil, they have like way less cost energy, and they are putting a lot of money into the AI investments. And what they want to do is they want to be able to provide 6% of global AI compute within a decade. So starting from 0 and going up to 6% of the global compute of all the AI being produced. It's kind of showing their aim is to be putting themselves there rather than being only oil producers. So that's quite a smart thing to do, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of infrastructure, So we'll see if they are able to gain this sovereignty, but at least they might become one of the big players in the AI ecosystem. Another thing is Europe, for example. So in Europe, it's a bit harder because they have like structural problems. Is where should we put plants to build the chips? Where should we put the big data centers? How are we going to produce the energy? I mean, Europe itself, in most of the countries, they don't have that much space left, so they have to discuss that. And there's also big difficulties to put the European markets, and investors are a bit more chilly about the risk. So it's hard to make them see the project of building big European data centers or stuff like this when your allies like the United States are actually providing them. So it's a bit harder, but the big plus point for Europe would be the possibility of synergies between the countries. So if we take just one example, is recently the German SAP, so software company, and they have been partnering with the French Mistral AI. And the idea is Mistral is a way smaller company, so they're going to use the already established position of SAP to be giving AI solution from Mistral that being smaller is being more energetic in a way and more dynamic in what they can produce. And the whole idea is being able to give AI solutions through the software of SAP. And SAP in their communication, they've been saying themselves that it's a partnership that is designed to ensure that European organizations can leverage cutting-edge AI while retaining control over their data, infrastructure, and further direction. So even SAP themselves are saying that it's actually for sovereignty in AI for the countries.
Right, and President Lee Jae-myung also has been highlighting therefore the importance of partnerships on the AI front between countries and between companies as well. Thomas, the administration here has reaffirmed its dedication commitment to advancing AI. Could you tell us a bit more about the policy here in South Korea?
Sure, yeah, so this administration, Lee Jae-myung has pretty much called the development of AI, a kind of a life or death existential question, and the importance of it, and has talked about, many people have framed it as South Korea needs to be in the top 3, or we're shooting for the top 3 AI countries in the world. And there's been, it's kind of also being treated as a whole of a nation type of mission. You've got infrastructure regulation, there's a lot of public-private partnership, and just trying to see it as a kind of a backbone of industrial transformation as well. And there's already seeing big investment promises. There's this national growth fund that was announced. That's I think the headline figure is 100 trillion won, or around 75 billion USD, in AI and related industries. In September, the government launched a National Artificial Intelligence Strategy Committee, which is also kind of a, private and government sector stakeholders, and coordinate AI strategy across infrastructure, data applications, regulation. And, the government hired a presidential chief AI advisor, who was Ha Jung-woo, who I mentioned before, from Naver. Also, the Minister of Science and ICT is Bae Kyung-hoon, who is from LG, also kind of an AI figure in LG, and they're kind of seen as, younger, more in the sort of AI and tech space than perhaps typical political figures or bureaucrats. So that's kind of a signal in the direction we're going. Recently during APEC, when Jensen Huang was here from NVIDIA, that was a big, a lot of headline grabbing, meal out at the fried chicken and beer place. But during that time, President Lee and and Jensen Huang agreed on buying 260,000 GPUs from NVIDIA. And I think just this past week, the government unveiled a task force about the purchase of those GPUs. And it's a bit like private-public. I think 50,000 are going to come from the government and 210,000 are going to be bought by the private sector. And that's, the Samsung, Hyundai, SK, and Naver, I think. So, I think South Korea has had success in the past with these kind of public-private, sort of government-directed industrial, growth efforts, and with kind of the willing partnership with the companies involved. And so, yeah, I think it's, a lot of it is around this sovereign AI push. And, some of it is also kind of, which Jensen Huang calls this physical AI, like implementing AI, outside of just something like, large language models or generative AI into industries, shipbuilding, energy, biotechnology. And I think that's going to also be a big focus. So, there's a lot of investment, a lot of emphasis, and sort of the big companies are on board. And, this idea that it will just sort of, AI will transform the economy in many, many different sectors. And I think there are some questions, though, and some challenges, and I think some have raised the fear of almost becoming a new tech kind of chaebol industry. Is all of it going to be, concentrated in just these, the giant sort of players, as we've seen sometimes in other fields. And then again, this question of where are we spending these resources? Is it worth it to try and build out your own LLM if there's already, you're already behind perhaps the other ones and, that exist? So should you be focusing maybe on more of these vertical integrations of AI? And so, I think just kind of continuing to win the support of the domestic tech ecosystem, will be important. And I think, for my sense is that people are looking at the next couple of years will be very decisive, maybe 2 to 5 years. And the success of it will just depend on the successful implementation of the infrastructure, the talent, and producing competitive AI products. But yeah, I mean, South Korea is certainly all in on this, for now.
Right, it is. And in the meantime, Chloe, AI is actually appears to be changing, having some social impact for the elderly here in the country. It's being used to offer Korea's aging population with company and comfort. This is something that CNN covered quite recently. Could you tell us a bit more about that particular coverage and your takeaways, of course?
Yeah, so our colleagues at CNN have been publishing an article explaining that there are some AI-powered robots that are helping fight South Korea's elderly mental health crisis. So first of all, the article starts with a very shocking and saddening figures saying that every day in South Korea, there is nearly 10 older adults who die by suicide. So that's a very shocking figure. And it's also important, obviously, since we're speaking about that, to remind everyone that there's help available. In South Korea, there's a helpline from the Ministry of Health and Welfare that is at 109. And globally, for people who are listening to, watching us worldwide, there's the International Association for Suicide Prevention that is giving every crisis centers around the world. So this being said, why is this figure so high? The journalists are giving a few different elements, but one of the main one is that the older citizens are feeling more and more alone and lonely. There is a very big shift in the society from living in big families together in South Korea to alone, like one person houses becoming slowly the norm right now. And there's also another problem is because we are in a super aging society, there's also a gap in the number of social care workforce available. That is something that's happening in a lot of countries actually, but here in Korea we can also see it is there's less and less people who are able to take care of the elders and that at the end, they spend their day alone. So one of the solutions that is being developed is the South Korean government is turning to tech companies to try to address what the article was calling the K-elderly crisis. And one of the solutions that they're speaking about is robots. So this robot is a doll-like robot that looks like a little kid, but very plushy style. And it's connected to a phone application. So as a family member of an elderly person, you have the phone application so that you can send messages to your close relative. You can also monitor them. The robot is also done to be giving some important information, like reminding the elderly to take their medication, for example, or giving them emergency alerts, like for the fires or anything. They will be the doll will be able to speak to the person. And the other thing is they have an AI-powered chat. So the robot is speaking with the voice and the vocabulary of around 7-year-old kid. So that will give the sensation for the elderly person to have a kid with them. So the robots can greet them when they come home. They can discuss. They can sing to them. They are also making like answers to the chats that can be done with the person in real time. So that's apparently, according to the article, it's quite an effective way in the people who have been trying it now. It has been seen as a very effective way to release loneliness and dementia. It obviously cannot replace human care. And one of the points that was also interesting raised by the article was some ethical questions. Are we infantilizing too much the elderly person? And they're saying that some of them that are without dementia or that are quite body able and everything are saying that it's a bit weird to be monitored like this by your families. And obviously there's always the question of the security of the data. So I know it's something that's taken really seriously by South Korea here, but all the data is anonymized. Is the chat being released somewhere? So that's kind of the things that have to be checked now.
Right, of course, concerns over data leaks continues to be a big problem, not just here in the country, but also across the world, of course. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Chloe, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
And Thomas, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business.